Hi, this is Lori, and this is my walkthrough for day 9 of the Cogsworth City Kit by Inventor.io. Now, this will be the last episode in my walkthrough because day 10, what is it? It's September 8th, 2024, and there is no lesson on day 10 at this point. So day 9 will be the last day for the walkthrough. I think it's actually okay to end on it. The Festival of Lights is the title of this one. And you can see the AI generated pictures of Astrid and looking at some various weird lamps with cogs and so forth. It seems kind of engaging. So let's look at the wiring diagrams. Pretty simple. We're just going to hook up 3 LEDs, and we're going to use a button, and we're just going to come up with some inventive ways of flashing these lights in various sequences and at various brightnesses to create some pretty patterns to look at. And then the button we'll use to switch between the various modes that we have for flashing the LEDs. Here's the code from the day 9 lesson. And I've made just a few small changes to this code. One is, as I've done on other days, I didn't use the pull-down resistor, external resistor here on the board, the breadboard. I'm going to use the internal pull-up resistor through Arduino code. So I just have the button grounded, and then the other side's going to the control pin here. So you'll see where I made those changes. Yeah, that's pretty much it on the changes. So we just set up the pins that we're going to connect everything to, and then the typical variables that we've used before to detect button presses. We have a variable to keep track of what mode, so what way we're going to flash the LEDs. We have different choices. When we press the button, we'll cycle through those. So which one are we on? And then we're going to use milliseconds, millis function to keep track of the timing so we know when to change the pattern that the lights are flashing. So we'll have a current millis and a previous millis variable to do that, and then an interval here for how fast is that changing of the lights going to occur. So right now it's at 100 milliseconds, and you could play with that and you'll watch it speed up or slow down depending on what you make this interval. So the setup, here's where I'm going to put in the pull-up resistor, and so that means I have to flip high versus low on button presses. So not pressed is high with the pull-up resistor, and low when it's pressed, which is the opposite of how it is in the original code. Yeah, we're going to use the built-in LED to signal that we've made a change. And then the original code in the lesson has the serial monitor being set up, but it's never used in the code, so I just took that out. I think they were using it to keep track. When you're debugging, it's nice to turn it on, and then you can print things out to say, what's not working. Is the timing right, or the LED's not getting set right, or something. You can print things to the serial monitor, so that's probably why it was in there. Yeah, I just wrote in here this millis function returns the number of milliseconds that has passed since the Arduino board began running the current program. And it's just important to know, like if you're establishing a program that's going to run, like controlling something in your house or something, it will overflow and it goes back to 0 after about 50 days. So you got a lot of time, and it certainly doesn't impact the project we're doing now. But it is important to keep track of that you have to be careful making code connected to that if it's something that's going to last a lot of days, like maybe like I said, an IoT project, or maybe you want to make temperature monitor or something, and you're just going to set it and let it go. Well, after about 50 days, it may not work the way you had thought it should. All right, so we're going to go ahead and get that time, and we're going to call that current millis as we come into the top of the loop. We're going to read the button. And then I just changed this code because I just think this is a little simpler. I just used the compound statement. So again, if the button state is low, that means it's pressed. But previously it was high, meaning it wasn't pressed. Then that must mean that I pressed the button, and we should do the things here. Otherwise, it'll skip this part of the loop and just keep going around and around waiting for me to press the button again. And then here's how we move to a new mode. So we need to cycle through 3 different choices. So we have a choice number 0, choice number 1, and choice number 2. And so you use modulo math to do that kind of thing. So you're adding 1 each time you come into this statement, and then you modulo 3. So you're going to get the remainder. Either it's going to evenly divide, or you're going to have a remainder of 1 or 2. And that's how the mode that's a trick to make mode cycle through whatever you divide by here. So that's a nice little trick to learn, useful for this kind of programming. Then we're just going to flash quickly the internal LED over here, and then we'll come down here, have a brief debounce, reset the button state to previous state, and then we'll choose which mode we're going to have. So if the mode is currently set to 0, it's going to run this fire mode function. If it's set to 1, it's going to run the fairy mode selection. And if it's 2, it's going to run the steady mode function. So the functions are defined below. So that's the main loop. So we'll come back here, and here's the code for doing the various choices here. So in this case, you can see that what it's looking for is, sorry for all that stuff coming up, but this previous millis. If the current minus the previous is greater than the interval, then we want to switch how we're doing the brightness of the 3 LEDs. So we're trying to make something that kind of flickers like a flame. And you can see also it's kind of clever how the brightnesses are done. So they're each through different ranges of brightness. And this approach it makes it look like a flickering, almost like a flickering flame. So actually, maybe if you'd switch some of these to orange and red and mix them up, you might get something that really looks like fire. That might be fun to play with too. And it'll do that, changing every time current millis minus previous millis is more than the interval. So that's how you get the flicker. And in the fairy mode, it also uses this creative way of kind of pulsing the 3 LEDs. So it uses a sine and a cosine. I've never seen this before, but you'll see how it looks. It works pretty well and creates an interesting pattern. And then there's the steady mode where they're just on. So those are the 3 modes in the original code. So hopefully that made some sense. Yeah, I guess it's a little more complicated, and those flicker and fairy mode are kind of interesting to look at and think about how they work. Let's plug it in, and I changed the view so we have a little bit better view of the LEDs. So we'll plug it in and kick it off. So you can see that that's slightly flickering, but it's really hard to film, and it doesn't show up as well. And one of the things in the lesson, we were requested to create a lamp and maybe use some tissue paper and make something look like a lamp to diffuse these lights and place over them to make it fun. And so I did something pretty simple. I took half a ping pong ball and put it on top of about 1 inch of a paper towel. So ping pong balls make pretty decent diffusers. And it also makes it easier to film LEDs a little bit. So now you can kind of see it flickering, and it's actually better in person as always, but it's filming okay. And so that's the fire mode. And so then if we press the button, you should have seen over here that flashed, that LED flashed. And now we're in the fairy mode, which was those cosine and sines, causing it to pulsate. And I think that's fun. I really like that pattern. And then if we press it one more time, then we get the steady, everything's on, and it should kind of almost be white when you see those 3 colors put together. They sort of blend to make white. And if we press again, then we're going to circle back to the fire mode. Well, that's the demo of the code as it was originally done, and I thought that was fun, and so I decided to add one more mode to it. I wanted to play around with the flickering, and then I ended up making something a little bit different. And I added an off mode. So we'll take a quick look at that code and demo that. All right, here's my additional pieces to the day 9 code. So I added what I ended up calling the disco mode, and I added an off mode. So it's actually plugged in and running the code, but it starts mode 0 is all the LEDs off. So I like that. I always like having an off setting for LEDs. So I put that first as mode 0. So we'll see here. So nothing else has changed in the setup. And the only thing that's changed is this switch mode. So now the off mode is first, fire mode, fairy mode, and then my new disco mode, and then the steady mode. So now you can see I have 0 through 4 cases. So when I did that, then I had to change this mode statement to divide by 5 because I have 5 choices, and that'll make that work. So also good to get get your hands around using that kind of a statement to cycle through the numbers. All right, so fire mode, fairy mode, steady mode. So here's my disco mode. So I kind of borrowed the idea from the fire mode, but I said, well, what if we just simply make it that green, blue, and red, just get a random brightness level from 1 to 255, and I just picked 1 so that it was never off. And I thought maybe that would flicker, and it does kind of make a flicker, but I think it's kind of more like disco because it's pretty big pulsating display, I think. And so that's what it made me think of, was disco, a disco ball and a, for dancing. And then the off mode is just setting the brightness to 0. Just like the steady mode sets them to 255, an off mode would set them to 0. So that's all I added there. So it's on. So let's just take a look at it. So that's off. And then we have the fire mode as in the original code, same. Here's our fairy mode. And then here's the new disco mode. And it's a little more a little more jarring. Definitely not like a fire, so I kind of see why they went with the strategy they were looking for to create that fire. But I think this one's fun too. And then we have the steady mode. And if I press one more time, we'll go back around to off. Yeah, so it works. So yeah, you could take this further and see if you could come up with some other ways of cycling through the lights, making different flashing patterns, and seeing how it looks. I think this was a fun lesson. It was one of my favorites, actually. And I definitely learned a little bit different technique with those fire mode and the fairy mode of ways to pulsate and make LEDs look like they're flickering. I thought that was fun. And yeah, I hope maybe in the next couple of days, if the day 10 gets a lesson, I'll add that to this list. But for now, I'm going to end this walkthrough. And as always, I want to thank you for watching.